Yes, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Faffing over Frequency podcast, episode 10. If I am correct, a bit of a milestone number hit on the podcast. Definitely took longer than expected to hit, but we hit it nonetheless. And from what I gather with story tags and just messages that I'm getting on socials, you guys are enjoying the episodes when they do come through. You know we'll talk about frequency of the episodes. Maybe not being the best, but at least I'm somewhat producing quality for you guys instead of just firing out a 30-minute rambling session every week. Try to make these a decent length and actually get across a good bit of information. But with clicking on this episode on YouTube or Spotify, YouTube if you want to see my gorgeous fat peak off season face, or Spotify if you're out in steps, you'll have seen the title of the podcast either way. And this week, or this month I should say, I want to sort of focus in on weak body parts and how to improve a weak body part, why your weak body parts aren't improving, and just sort of touch on a few things that you need to be focusing on. What should actually be the plan, the point of call for you to assess and bringing up a weak body part? Because if you have competitive aspirations, you notice a weak body part, that's going to have to be brought up. Balance is rewarded in bodybuilding. I'm a fan of particularly strong body parts, to say the least. I think if someone has a really wow body part that stands out, um, like if someone has fucking 10 out of 10 quads on maybe a 7 or 8 out of 10 physique, I think that looks wicked. I think you'll get a really good look from the judges. But that's the only time I like balance being thrown off. If your balance is being thrown off by a particularly weak particularly weak body part, then it's not so good. That's something that needs addressed. I think when guys have a really strong body part and they really like back down on volume, yes, sometimes it's applicable to bring more balance, but I really like just sort of pushing on with that really strong body part and having it as like sort of a wow factor on stage. But yeah, I wanted to sort of make a podcast on this because if you follow my content, my YouTube, Instagram quite closely, you'll know that my quads were sort of my biggest downfall, weakness in this previous diet that I done. I definitely thought I had a lot more muscle on my lower body when I was 215 pounds compared to what I actually had when I was 173. Now, if you want to think about like fatigue, hiding detail, just being a bit battered towards the end of a deficit, yeah, I'll probably look smaller. But even when I was fresher, maybe a month or two post diet, which I held conditioned super well, I actually probably got leaner. If anything, my quads still weren't up to par. Front lat spread being one of my probably strongest poses, I would say, just with how wide I can get up the top line. It's just let down with that lack of quad sweep. So these are sort of a few things that I have really dialed in on. This push up, I've been pushing up. It's going to be exactly a year of pushing up, really, maybe, well, a year and a week. Finished my diet 25th of October last year. Going to start dieting 1st of November this year. That is the pre-prep diet. So I think I have 9 weeks left. And what's really good to think about and sort of proves that I've actually improved that body part. It's sort of it definitely strikes a bit of confidence in my approach. Is I still have a good level of quad detail at this sort of 25 pounds up mark. What's that, 12 kilo up? I still have quad striations. And these quad striations are, I'm 197 pounds right now. I didn't have quad striations in my diet till be sub 180, maybe 178, 179 pounds. So the fact that I only got them at that body weight and I've held on to them, with an extra 18 pounds of body weight, that means that you've built muscle. Because what do we know about sort of holding condition or improving conditioning? A stronger body part more muscle is going to hold condition better. This is why you see these huge, super heavyweight guys in the open classes holding on to such good condition in their off season. You see, fucking James Hollingshead, he doesn't look soft in the peak of his off season. He still looks hard as nails, but they'll still pull off 40 pounds in a prep because they have that much muscle that they'll never get this softer look. So the more muscle you have, the better condition a body part's going to hold. So the fact that I have quad striations, I'm holding that condition at this body weight, shows that I have added a lot of muscle. But diving into the first thing that I think needs assessed, and it simply has to be execution. If you look at a weak body part and anything other than execution is the first thing that you want to assess, you are looking at it wrong. Execution, training performance is the biggest driver of physique change, physique progress, building muscle, however you want to determine it, or refer to it as. It simply is. You need to be delivering stimulus. Yes, recovery is important because that's when you're building the muscle. But if your recovery is 100%, but you're training shit, what do you have to recover from? You need to focus on execution. So, couple tips when it comes to execution. First of all, I'll preface this. If you work with a coach, don't be lazy. Be militant with sending over training clips. You know, you pay for a service, send over training clips until your coach is saying, okay, mate, no, I don't need to see this anymore. You can reduce the amount of times you send me this. This is all very, very good work. Even if you send over a lift and they have one small little improvement, send it over the next week. Get the feedback till there's weeks on weeks where they don't have to make, you know, any sort of critiques or tweaks to your form or execution. I think you should be sending over form clips to your coach every week. Yes, it's giving them more work, but you pay for a service. I would be really annoyed if guys didn't send me over form clips that on movements that needed improve because they're thinking, I don't want to give them extra work. That is what you pay for. But then again, you know, if you're thinking out of respect for the coach, they're not tweaking your training, critiquing your training every week. They can sort of give you the green light. You don't need to be sending over 20 form clips. Just think about that in that regard. So that is execution preface. Just wanted to get that out there. And then again, if you're not working with a coach, ask for a bit of advice. Watch other people train. You know, there's so many aspiring coaches out there that are putting out very valuable training content. And although on socials you have to be selective and, you know, confident in the person that you're taking advice from, it's still worth asking questions. You know, if you really relate to somebody, you see results with their training methods, their approach to things, ask for advice. A lot of these people will happily, myself included, will happily chuck you a DM replying to help you out with execution. You know, if you send over a set, I will no issues. I have no issues with watching a couple minutes of, you know, leg extensions, hack squats if someone has weak quads, and maybe give them a few pointers. There's no issue at all. But getting on to the actual in the set moment, what can you be doing to improve? Now, since my quads have been the focus, and I've just started this whole podcast with saying execution is the first thing you need to assess, my execution of squat patterns, just all quad work, leg pressing, leg extending, has execution has been the forefront of my mind, and I've changed it quite significantly. Peak body weight, I was bombing into the hole of Cybex Mark 1 hack, getting super mentally aroused for sets, interstellar soundtrack on. You know, let's fucking move 4 plates. Okay, nice. I've hit 4 plates. When can I get to 4.25? When can I get to 4.5? Yeah, you're increasing load, mate, but I think people need to realize load actually means nothing in terms of growth. There's nothing that says more load creates more muscle. People will say more load equals more mechanical tension. I know for a fact I've said that in the past, but you know, I'm more educated now. That is couldn't be further from the truth. Load is not correlated to mechanical tension. I think teaching intensity to people, load can be a very good tool. You know, Okay, load this up, get a good 5-6 rep set where you're struggling from rep one. That'll teach you intensity. But more load does not mean more mechanical tension, and that's going to be the ultimate driver of muscle growth. So focus on just quality sets and not chasing load. So time in the stretch, I think, is something a lot of people need to assess whether they're given enough attention to in their training. Time in the stretch, so you're able to control that change of direction. If we think of a hack squat, you're coming into the hole. So let's say I'm dive bombing into it and then immediately shooting up into my rep. That load really isn't put on my quads. That's a lot of stretch reflex just being utilized out of the hole, the heaviest part of the hack squat. So yes, I've got 4 plates on the machine, but how much of that load is actually being sort of driven through the quads? Whereas if I load up 3 plates, control that descent, control that change of direction, I have pressure on my entire whole foot, my sort of tripod foot. Um, all my weight is just held there on the base of my foot, the sole of my foot. It's all on the quad. I maybe pause for a second, half a second in the stretch, and then contract up whilst, on the descent, cueing, bending at the knee. It's night and day difference. I promise you, do not be afraid of reducing the load that you're using, because a set to failure, a set of high intensity, uh, is a set to high intensity. I could have maybe phrased that better, but high intensity is high intensity no matter the load on the machine. I promise you, more load. Just because you have 4 plates on the machine does not mean you're growing more muscle than if you were to do two. Probably grow more with two because you can actually get a quality set as long as both sets are taken to, or as long as the lighter set is taken to a proximity of failure. You're building muscle, and people need to realize that. I've been listening to a lot of Chris Tuttle podcasts. He speaks a lot on longevity and actually allowing the muscle have an intent on the targeted muscle or the intended muscle, um to actually be utilizing it in the reps. And if you can use less load, you're just setting yourself up for more longevity. And that sort of brings me on to my next point inside execution. Slower eccentrics will help you limit load on the machine, and uphold joint longevity. A point that I have coming up is utilizing higher frequency and maybe trying to maximize recoverable volume. If you're training a muscle group 3 times a week, there might be a sort of chance, or a higher chance, that you get flare ups of your joints, get run into more niggles, more injuries, especially when you're using 4 plates on a hack squat when you don't really have the right to. If you slow down your eccentric, that's obviously going to limit the amount of load you can use. Make your sets maybe over a minute long, maybe do some higher rep sets. Less load, less stress on the joint, more stress on the muscle, more mechanical tension. That is what's going to allow you to grow. I have really shifted my outlook on training more so to longevity and just not being an idiot. Um, you know, there was a podcast that got brought up. My name got brought up in it, and it definitely rubbed me the wrong way, saying I should be using more load on a certain squat pattern. Maybe some of you guys that are podcast fanatics in the UK bodybuilding scene will know what I'm referencing. Definitely rubbed me the wrong way, because it's like, look, what are the benefits of actually using more load than what I've said? It drives a bit of intensity, but if you're at a good sort of training knowledge, you can bring a set with a lighter weight to all the way to failure if you want. It just takes composure, and I think vast majority of people that train to a high level have that composure to bring a lighter weight to failure. So don't get caught up in loading. Utilize slower eccentrics. Keep the intent on the targeted muscle. Now, another thing with execution is, are your reps standardized? I posted a story the other day when my goal in a set is to always try to keep each rep identical. So the same tempo on the descent, the same tempo spent pausing in the stretch or contracted position, same range of motion, the same amount of rest at lockout if I am locking out. More standardized we can make a set, the more capable we are of, assessing progression. If you start to change your execution towards the end of a set by speeding up your eccentrics so you can maybe squeeze out one more rep, well, that's not a standardized set. If you take a progression there, it's probably not actually a progression due to adaptation. It's just you changing execution and making yourself more. If you change your positioning, like your range of motion, something like that, that's just making you mechanically stronger. You're not actually, the muscle growth adaptation has not caused that progression in the lift, if you get what I'm saying. So always keep reps standardized. When you're trying to bring up a weak body part, it's also important to really assess your progress on your lifts. So if you are progressing your lifts solely down to the fact that you're taking a two second pause at the top at lockout, let's say on a hack squat, you sort of lock your knees, you take 2 seconds at the top one week. Next week, okay, that was a hard set, I'm going to take 3 seconds. Okay, next week, okay, I've took 4 breaths. Now you're just extending the rest between the next rep. That's not actually a muscle growth adaptation provoked progression. I said that way more complicated than it needed to be, but that's simply down to your muscle recovering, getting a bit more recovery time in the set. You could have took that same amount of reps 2 weeks ago if you just took the same amount of rest at the top. We want to keep things standardized, so when you take a progression, we actually know it's as a result of muscle being built and not just a sort of change up to execution or rushed execution. When people actually do start chasing the logbook though and start speeding up reps, that's when you lose out in stimulus as well. If we look at a muscle group, there's certain muscle groups in the body that respond best to being trained in the lengthened range. So we look at like some of these are hamstrings, biceps, chest. If you start speeding up your reps, maybe cutting your range short in the stretch where they respond best, you're just you know cutting yourself short in terms of stimulus. If I'm not getting a full stretch of my pec, I'm not getting my knees fully extended in the stretch of a hamstring curl. I'm not getting my elbows fully extended or my tricep contracted when I'm doing a bicep curl. I'm just literally throwing stimulus out the window, all because I want to write a +1 in the logbook. The logbook should be sort of a sign that you're increasing stimulus, getting that +1, not not the other way around, that you decrease stimulus so you can write the plus 1. You want to increase stimulus so you can write the +1 and be confident in it. But to sort of finish up on execution, I have really changed my stance on internal cues and sensation, especially since listening to more Chris Tuttle. I knew it was going to be a necessary thing coming into this push up to improve my quads, because I also posted a story about this as well. Your strongest muscle groups are probably going to be the ones that you naturally get more of a connection with. So I use the example of like a rear delt fly or a hip hinge. I can do pretty lackluster execution on either of those movement patterns and come off with a pretty good pump. I do bad execution on a hack squat, leg press, I'm coming off and my quads don't feel like they've trained. So I knew that was going to be something that I had to assess. And it's just been exaggerated even more by listening to Chris Tuttle speak more. Your your sensation and actually feeling like you're utilizing the intended muscle matters so much. And this ties into the loading thing as well. If I feel my quads so much more on 2 plates, with 2 plates on a machine, compared to 4 plates with no sensation, take the 2 plates. Given that intensity is still the same, you're still taking that 2 plate set to a close proximity of failure. That if you're coming off with such an exponentially better sensation in the muscle group, go for the lighter weight. Absolutely. But internal cues really do matter so much more than I've thought in the past, and it's particularly came to me with leg press patterns, particularly the hip press pattern. If anything, everyone knows on a hip press you can get some serious depth. You can really sort of fold yourself in half, have your knees, basically by your ears. So you'd think, okay, I'm hitting unbelievable depth here. My quads have to be getting blown up. But what I've started thinking about is, what are the actual things that the muscle group needs to be trained? So to train the quads effectively, in the stretch and the descent, we want a good level of knee flexion, so a bend at the knee. So instead of just trying to fold myself on the hip press, I'm going to actually internally cue bending at the knee. And this just means there's less hip flexion going on. My internal cue is genuinely letting my toes, sort of come back. If I YouTube listeners or YouTube watchers can sort of imagine this, but if I'm just going into more hip, I can't even do it with my hands. That was stupid. Sorry, Spotify listeners. But if I'm just letting myself hit depth, a lot of that's going to come through hip flexion. If I actually think about bending at the knee, so my shin is generally just like bending, coming closer, to sort of my hamstring, rather than my hip moving back as well. Because when you're assessing knee flexion in quad training, if your knees actually start to move backward, that's actually reducing quad stimulus. It's reducing knee flexion. It's creating more hip flexion. So that's something you need to watch out for. Not all depth, not more depth is always better. It generally is about cueing bend at the knee. Posted a story yesterday. I'm always posting these stories, guys. Um, you're not watching my stories. What are you doing? But I posted a story on the hip press. I meant to do one set on this, but I took a back off just because the first one felt melt. Oh my god, cannot speak. Felt mint, and that totally just came from that solely came from viewing this bend at the knee. I came off, and my VMO, my teardrop, was lit up. I'd never felt it like that at all on the hip press, and this is using less load than I've ever used before. It was still a set to a close proximity to failure, and I just ultimately imagine that's getting so much more than just trying to fold myself, not cueing bending at the knee, and using an extra 20 kilo. I'm getting so much more mechanical tension from actually thinking about utilizing the intended muscle group. Um, uh, so yeah, to wrap up execution, I think sensation is so much more important than even myself has made out in the past. So in light of the podcast name, we're next going to touch upon frequency. So weak body part, what is the best way to grow it? You're now doing your sets to a very high standard. Your coach, if you're self-coached, you're assessing that execution is perfect. You can't improve anymore there. Now let's sort of look at the more intricate sort of programming details to help bring up that body part. So frequency, I think it is more important than volume to bring up a muscle group, to grow a muscle group overall. Ultimately, like delivering fresh stimulus as many times as you can during the week, I think that's how you grow. So if that's 2 sets 3 times a week, that I think that's better than 6 sets once a week. Absolutely. Having no fatigue present, I think that's when you can get the best out of that muscle group and deliver the most stimulus. So this means trying to maximize frequency and having volume relevant to that. So, how do we maximize frequency? What is the most frequent we can train a muscle group? In my opinion, it's every other day. I don't think you want to be training a muscle group 2 days in a row. I am not a fan of that. I'm having no real recovery time at all. But unfortunately, not everyone's split aligns with every other day hitting a muscle group. You know, if I think about quads, if I was to hit them every other day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that would be. I hit them Monday and Wednesday, but then Friday's upper. Yeah, sweet. I can hit them with upper, no problem. But then I have legs on Saturday. I can't, or I have, legs on Sunday. So I have a rest on Sunday. Let's look at this. If I hit legs with upper on a Friday, or quads specifically, what am I going to do on Saturday's leg day? I'm going to be training quads 2 days in a row. Don't want that. Okay, let's try do the next day, which is Sunday, which would mean every other day. Oh, I'm on a rest day. I'm not going to the gym to do 3 sets of leg extensions. Don't care how bad you want it. No one is doing that. Maybe if you have a home gym and you don't want an actual 7 day split, but that's what I want. So that's not feasible. So I think for most people, capping frequency out at 3 times a week, whether that's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, something like that. Maximize it at 3 times per week, and you're maximizing on the frequency aspect. What I will touch upon as well, it's important to note with your frequency training at 3 times a week, don't have that as the same movement at the same fatigue level. So I don't want to be doing, say, quads. I don't want to be doing the side X leg extension 3 times a week with the exact same load, just aiming to progress at every session. That's how you're going to hit a plateau. The way I set up my quad work, I train at them on a Monday, Wednesday, or Monday, Wednesday, Saturday. So Monday at the start of pull, I'll do 3 sets on the prime leg extension, plate loaded. Wednesday, I will do, it's a leg day, so I'm going to do a squat pattern, a leg press, and then a leg extension. So that's different to Monday. Then Saturday, I am doing another leg day, which starts off with a leg extension, then a squat pattern, then a leg press. So all of my quad training is in a different order. I'm utilizing different amount of load, a different amount of load if I'm using the same piece of kit. And I haven't ran into a plateau yet in this off season. Touchwood. But getting on to the volume aspect of training, we obviously know that volume and frequency relate pretty heavily together. If you're maximizing frequency, going the higher frequency approach, you can't do high volume as well. That's just not recoverable, especially if you nailed the first point of the podcast, which is execution. If you're doing high intensity sets with great execution, you're deriving a lot of stimulus out of these sets. You can't do those sets 3 times a week at a high volume as well. You need to balance out the three. So if you're doing 3 times a week frequency, you're going to have to err on the side of caution with volume. Whereas if you're hitting a body part once or twice per week, you can really hammer the volume. But as I said, I do think more frequency is the way forward with less volume. So the things you need to assess or think about, consider when it comes to volume, is that not all sets of a body part are created equally. If we look at quads, for example, I'll just keep this as the example because it's what I've been working for in this push-up. If we look at a set of leg press versus a set of pendulum squats versus a set of hacks versus a set of leg extensions, they're all going to create a different sort of recovery demand, recovery debt, even sort of mental recovery in the session. If you create a leg day, program a leg day, you have 6 sets of quads that you can recover from. You do all of those on the hack squat, you're going to be mince. You're not going to be able to recover from those. Let's take it a step in a different direction. 3 sets of hack and 3 sets of leg press. Probably a bit easier than 6 sets of hack, but still not that productive. Okay, let's add in a leg extension. So a leg extension is going to be far less taxing, far less mental arousal need than a hack squat or a leg press. If you make up 2 of your sets, 2 out of your 6 sets through a leg extension, you can get away with 2 sets of a squat pattern and 2 sets of a leg press. So it's about balancing these. If I was to really push up a body part's volume as well, it would be through the isolation movement. So that's why the start of pull, I'm not doing a hack squat. I'm doing a leg extension. Least fatiguing method of training the quad, so I can still get in productive, productive pull work ahead. I don't want to be loading up a hack squat, getting super mentally aroused, mentally taxed at the start of legs or at the start of pull, and ruining my back work. If I was to you know load up that hack squat, imagine 3 sets of hacks at the start of pull. That would be crazy. Whereas I can get in the leg room in our gym, 20 minutes goes by, I've done my 3-4 sets of leg extensions, and I'm pretty fresh. I can go hit something. I can go hit the rest of my pull session. Now, when it comes to tapering volume, titrating it up or down based on recovery needs, I think you do need to assess lift progression. You can be sore. A body part can be sore going into the next time you train it. Quite often my quads are sore going into the next quad session. I can always picture, since my prime leg extension on pull is so top peg heavy, it's so heavy in the stretch, and that obviously creates more of a sort of recovery burden. My quads are pretty fucking smoked when it comes to Wednesday's leg day, but I still progress my quad work on a Wednesday because soreness doesn't indicate being under recovered. You can still progress lifts and be adequately recovered with a bit of soreness present. How you assess that you're not recovering from your volume is lift progressions. Are you not progressing? Are you not getting stronger? Or is your strength starting to drop off? That is really how you assess whether something is recoverable from you. If you're doing 6 sets of quads on a Saturday, comes to Monday, and 3 weeks in a row you've dropped a rep on, say, your leg extension, like my setup, that 6 sets is not recoverable in those 2 sleeps till Monday. So Saturday and Sunday night into Monday's leg extension work, you can't recover from that if you're consistently getting weaker. So yes, I'm now following a no logbook approach. So what I've actually done is I'm more so erring on the side of caution with my volume. I've actually dropped volume since dropping off the logbook. Just because I can't really assess how, or I can't pinpoint, am I getting stronger or am I getting weaker every session. So I just took the safe option. Why be overtraining and under recovering when I can just drop off a set, especially since my execution and set quality, set productivity has increased so much. So that meant going to 1 set on something like the hip press. That meant dropping my 4 leg extension sets on pull day to 2 and 1 single leg. It meant dropping my pendulum squat on a Saturday to 1 set instead of 2, just so I'm ensuring that I can recover. Because if I was recovering from those previous volume landmarks, before ditching the logbook, I can just be sure that I don't need a huge volume drop off to continue to recover. So that is volume ticked off. We have frequency, volume, and what is the third pillar of sort of programming? It is intensity. Now, listening to Chris Tuttle podcast again, he's a very knowledgeable guy. He has done infinite podcasts as well. If you guys want to go up and listen to some of his stuff, I really believe you'll learn a lot. That's actually a side note. To go off on a um I don't know, the word's not coming to me, but to go off on a side note, people ask me, where'd you learn all this stuff? How can you talk about this stuff so confidently? Listen to podcasts, man. You know, this is why a lot of the bodybuilding vloggy stuff I don't really watch, because I'm spending my time during meals, when I'm winding down in the evening, I'm watching a podcast, educational stuff. You're improving yourself listening to. I also think it's better for when you're eating a meal. I don't want to be eating a meal to someone, doing a vlog, changing paces all the time. Whereas a podcast, it's just a sit down conversation. You eat the meal at your own pace, intake that information, and you can pick up So many little tips and tricks, little bits of information, golden nuggets, if you want to use that term, from podcasts. Definitely. If you're not consuming a lot of podcast content, which you probably are if you're listening to this, but for anyone that spends a lot of time doom scrolling or even listening to music during steps, to switch to a podcast if you're really serious about increasing your foundations of knowledge. But yes, Chris Tuttle again has sort of changed my outlook on intensity. I am now somewhat entertaining a reps in reserve sort of approach. Now, guys, bear in mind, I'm entertaining the idea of reps in reserve. I'm not actually doing it yet. I'm not following a strict 1 rep, 2 rep in reserve, 2 reps in the tank every set approach. I'm just thinking maybe the top set on a movement that I have 3 sets on. Maybe I won't take it to failure. Maybe I'll not even go to 0 reps in reserve, which I've previously always programmed. That just means going to your last rep that you think you deem that you're able to complete. I will never chance that 50-50 rep. That's something that hasn't changed. But yes, go into that last rep that you're capable of doing. I might even stop one shy of that, because what do we actually gain from going to failure? You gain a little bit of extra stimulus, but you also gain an exponentially um higher amount of fatigue from that set, which is more of a recovery burden. It's less volume that you're going to be able to get away with, potentially more impact on your joints, more niggles. So not every set probably needs to be taken that far. Everyone believes in this sort of gun pointed at your head level of intensity, and you just really have to question the points that I've touched on before this. If you're maximizing frequency and volume with really good execution, really accurate sets, is gunned ahead, fucking Dorian Yates is behind you with a M1911 from Black Ops 2 pointed at your head saying do one more. Is that sustainable with all these other variables in check and sort of optimized to make the most progress possible? It's probably not. We know there's a lot of literature regarding reps in reserve. The whole argument is yes, you get more stimulus going closer to failure, but the amount of fatigue that those final reps generate heavily outweighs the extra little bit of stimulus you get. So it's something to think about. Yes, I don't want people training like bitches. I will still mostly take my sets to 0 reps left in the tank, not chancing a 50-50 rep, because I don't want to feel a rep at all. That's a really big burden to your recovery. That's a big burden to subsequent sets in the session. If you feel your top set of hack squat and you have a back off and 2 sets of leg press after it, you're gonna notice a bit of a drop off in those subsequent sets if you get buried by the hack squat. So trying to never feel a set, always trying to end it with a complete rep. But if you're nailing these other pillars of programming, you probably don't need to be balls to the wall intense. And a lot of people don't want to hear that, because the UK bodybuilding scene, and including myself, have been so set in stone on mental arousal, training with everything you've got, crying before sets, listening to Kuba or Trained by JP audio. But it's just, you need to look at everything objectively. As a bodybuilder, should you be getting ill every week? Should you have digestive issues every week? Should you have trouble sleeping? No. Is that derived from the absurd CNS tax that you're building up from your training? It's very likely. To touch back on that podcast that I got brought up on using less load, the guy that brought up my name, ill every week, bad digestion, bad joints, plagued by injuries. It's like, maybe you should assess your training if you want to be the best bodybuilder you can be. But then your argument is, I wouldn't enjoy training if I can't be an idiot in the gym and just full send sets. I'm not there to change that approach for you. I'm just saying, be objective, look at things on paper. What is actually, the most productive. But it does depend on enjoyment. We ultimately, this is a hobby for all of us. Make sure you damn enjoy it. Tie it in with quality of life. Do the things you bloody enjoy. Don't be training 10 reps with super good execution, intent on the targeted muscle, internal cues for every rep. Don't be doing that if you don't enjoy it. Take the less progress, but enjoy your process more. I know for myself, in my current position in bodybuilding, I really want to progress as a bodybuilder, and I've sort of got a newfound love for this accuracy in my sets with less load and feeling the targeted muscle more. But the last thing I want to touch upon when it comes to weak body parts is this sort of high day or cheat meal application. Do they have application to bringing up a weak body part? So I think first of all, they have more application on the assisted side of bodybuilding when you can obviously utilize something like insulin, increase that partitioning towards the working muscle, deliver more nutrients, amino acids, glucose, whatever you want to say. Um, if you can utilize something like insulin, there's more rationale to having a higher intake on that weak body part day, maybe around the workout window. If you're a natural guy, you have to think about it. When you're looking at like an endurance sport or something, someone carving up, which is this definitely sort of challenges everyone's approach in the specifically the UK bodybuilding scene. If you're fueling up for an event or something, you're doing it the day before. So that would imply that your non-training day or your training day before's food is fueling the next day's session. So if I train push on a Tuesday, legs on a Wednesday, my push day food is fueling the leg day. If I have a big surplus on the leg day, is your pre-workout meal really fueling your pre-workout or your session? Is it 90 minutes, 60 minutes before your session? Do you think that full meal, that 150 grams of carbs, 50 grams of protein, 20 grams of fat, is that fueling your session? No, it's not. It's the day before's food because it's fully saturated. It has been digested, partitioned into muscle glycogen. That is what's fueling your session. So if you're to run a high day on the weak body part day without the use of insulin or something, you can't fuel that session. You're just increasing your surplus, which is ultimately going to lead to more body fat gain. If you look at the cheat meal situation as well, should I have cheat meal after my big training session? Should I have a cheat meal before my big training session? Again, they're not really affecting that weak body part day. It's the nutrition the day before. So if you were to have a cheat meal the night before a weak body part day, if I was to have the cheat meal before the night before legs, in theory, yes, that is then being utilized in that weak body part session. But our approach to off-plan meals should all, if you care about staying tight, staying lean, responsive in the off season, your off-plan meals shouldn't be cheat meals. They should be sort of within your calorie allowance. So if you are following that rule of thumb, and say you're on 3.5 calories, 3,500 calories as a baseline diet, and you have a 1,500 calorie off plan meal, so you only eat 2,000 before, your calories are equated. You're having the same amount of fuel going into that session tomorrow, but it's just through worse food sources and maybe worse macronutrient allotments. You might be having 90 grams of fat and however many carbs compared to exponentially higher carbs and lower fat. So if your approach to off-plan meals is actually how it should be to limit body fat gain and stay productive in the off season, you're just actually fueling yourself less in theory because you're eating the same amount of calories, but it's probably just going to be more fat, less protein, less carb. So the cheat meal really doesn't have application. That could maybe even have detrimental impacts to your training session the next day if you get digestive stress, you have a worse appetite the next day, so you can't stomach your full first two meals pre-workout. You can't stomach your food the rest of the day. You sleep worse because you've got stomach pain, you've bad digestion, you eat too close to bed. So the cheat meal before the night before doesn't even have application either. Wanted to touch upon that one as well because I see a lot of natural guys running high days on a weak body part, and I just don't know if I agree with it. As always, I'm very open to be enlightened on things, get people's perspectives. This is why I listen to so many podcasts. There's so many ways to skin a cat. Maybe someone has an argument that a high day is going to be beneficial for growth. Maybe they've got anecdotal evidence that it has done absolute bits. I would just argue if you're doing a training day, non-training day sort of setup on food, are you not just getting softer? If they've stayed tight the whole off season, utilizing high days on weak body parts, effectively brought up that weak body part, fair play to them. But they've probably brought up the weak body part, but got soft towards the end of their off season. Now this could be different on a carb cycling approach where you don't follow training day foods. You maybe do like a low carb day to spike hunger, and a high carb day the day before your weak body part cheat meal, um just to sort of balance out the calories for the week so you're not going above that sort of weekly caloric intake that you need to grow, and ultimately you're staying more tight in the off season. But definitely wanted to touch on that because it is probably one of my gripes at the minute in the bodybuilding scene, the natural bodybuilding scene. Running a high day on a weak body part, I don't see application. But I'm open for you guys to give your take on that one because, as always, as I just said as well, I am open to hear opinions. Now, like every episode, I want to end it with the takeaway of the week. And we're going back to food, boys. We just came off the cheat meal application and we're staying on the cheat meal topic. And it is this idea that in my own process, I have less and less application, or I'm realizing that there is less and less application for heavy off plan eating, even in the off season. Last Sunday, my cheat meal was a steak. Cooked myself a ribeye steak, pulled fats out from previous meals, used the steak as the protein source, and a lot of my fats for the day. Probably went a good chunk over my fats, in fairness, because it was a ribeye. They're like 40 grams of fat, maybe more, depending on the size. So probably still went over my calories, but I dropped weight the next day. It's a single ingredient food, full of micronutrients, digested perfectly. And I just think these cleaner off plan meals, you know, cooking a steak, maybe going out for a steak and having a mashed potato or a baked potato, sorry, some veg, maybe going for Vietnamese food, single ingredient rice, salmon, egg, maybe a bit of sushi where you focus on mainly nigiri and limit the rolls that have a fuck ton of mayonnaise and shit. The burger and fries, that's a huge fucking 2,000 calories in one sitting of shitty food sources. I was naming good ones there, and then I went to the burger and fries. So the good ones, the single ingredient stuff that are really good sources, we should be focusing on that rather than the burger and fries. I've got this fucking back pain, guys. No, life's so sore. My scalp. I think I need a rub down from Emma. I might have to get booked in soon. But anyway, less and less application for this off-plan eating. And the whole thing I wanted to bring up, I brought this up to the Lifestyle Loops boys, but in a different context. It's like, should we be thinking as ourselves as bodybuilders and just sort of thinking maybe these things don't belong in our diet at all? I think a lot of people talk about sacrifice in bodybuilding, and for me, not going out drinking, not partying isn't much of a sacrifice. I haven't made much of a sacrifice at all when it comes to bodybuilding. I enjoy what I do. Maybe the sacrifice, the thing that, I have to be really disciplined for is not being silly with my cheat meals and choosing these whole single ingredient foods, these smart off plan choices, and not being silly, because this is what I mean. Maybe they just don't belong in our diets at all. Maybe we should sacrifice that food and just imagine ourselves, we're bodybuilders, we eat super clean year round if we want to eat, make the most progress. I don't know if this is just the position that I'm in the off season where I don't crave those really bad food sources, but I probably will when it comes to the end of the pre-prep diet, the end of the prep. But I'm also, I think I can be objective and look and be like, this is still more conclusive to my goals. Having a steak, going for a bit of nigiri, just rice and raw fish. These are so much better choices. So, if you're going out for dinner, maybe I should just go for the dinner, be like a calm choice at dinner, and not have dessert after. If I want dessert, maybe I don't go out for dinner. Maybe I limit the amount of off-plan eating that I have. As well as choosing better options. And this is just sort of something that's running through my mind because I had that steak last Sunday and I was like, this is amazing. This is so much better than going for a burger and fries, and I know it's making me a better bodybuilder. So that is just sort of something that's running through my mind at the minute, guys. My own process, something that I might look to really just sort of implement the rest of my bodybuilding where I'm at. It's hard to speak for the rest of your bodybuilding when I'm sort of when I know I'm going to be in this game a long time. I hope. So I'm speaking for maybe the next 20 years, but like I want to be the best bodybuilder I can be. So maybe these smarter off-plan choices is the sacrifice that I have to make. Because as I said, not partying, not drinking, um, having a good sleep routine, going to bed early. These aren't sacrifices to me. These are things I love to do. So the sacrifice might be just totally eradicating these shitty off-plan meal choices from my diet entirely. But yeah, guys, gonna leave episode 10 there. Hopefully that was a thought-provoking one. Hopefully there is a little bit that you do take away, apply to your own process when you're considering weak body parts. And trying to bring those up to bring your best physique to the stage. And hopefully that little chat at the end there about the off plan eating also um, is a bit thought provoking for you. Maybe changes your approach, your outlook on off plan eating, and maybe you're like me and you decide, the sacrifice is about making better choices when I go off plan. So you did make it this far, almost at an hour on this one. I've definitely talked a lot more than I thought I would, but just got into the flow state, guys. So you did make this far, please drop a like, comment, share, subscribe. Story tags, as always, on Instagram, much appreciated. I know Lifestyle Loops is getting a hell of a lot of story tags these days. Fucking Sundays are literally dedicated to Lifestyle Loops now. Basically, it is very awesome to see. I know when I do drop an episode of Faffing over frequency, it does get several story shares as well. So I very much appreciate you guys that do that. So without rambling on anymore, gonna leave this episode here. That is episode 10, and no, I'll not promise. I'll not make any promises for the next one being out, episode 11 being out, even in the next month. So guys, I'll just leave you with this one, and hopefully you're looking forward to episode 11.